actively.
I think that's a really interesting point, and a point that I think journalism schools are trying to address right now by kind of breaking down those boundaries between web and broadcast and print and all of those, because there really, in my mind, there is no distinction anymore. At some point in your career, you're going to have to do everything, and you learn. I think that students who are entering journalism school right now are in the best position to do so, because I think that there are forward-looking people in this room and across the country that are aiming to break down those walls. You know, a broadcast reporter will be doing stuff for the web, and a print reporter will at some point probably appear on TV. That's just the way it goes. To answer Matt's question, I think one of the things that I didn't learn in journalism school is something that I don't think you can really learn in journalism school, and it's something that you have to learn by going out and practicing journalism, whether in a part-time job or an internship, and that's just how fast-paced this business works. And when you're on the assignment desk in a newsroom like I am, or you're out in the field, something you can't really teach, or you really have to try hard to find a new way to teach, is how to adapt, like Stephen said, how to figure out at a moment's notice how you're going to tell this story, and how to do it as quickly as possible, because your newsroom is going to be bearing down on you to get your information out there accurately and very, very quickly. I don't think that there is a current model in place in journalism school right now to appropriately address really just how quickly this business moves.
I would have to agree with that. I think that my biggest concern, I have 2 journalism degrees. I got one from AU, and I also did journalism school undergrad at the University of Iowa. And I think at both places, it's really difficult to mimic how fast-paced the business is. And it's hard to, especially when you're a class that only meets like once or twice a week, to really show students how quickly the business works. But like I've had a lot of classes where I have an entire semester to work on just one project, and while that's great, that's not really what you do in the real world. I mean, that's not going to happen when you're 22. You're going to have to learn the skills of you go to a press conference or you go to a meeting or a hearing, and you have to learn how to pick out the news right away and formulate how you're going to tell that story and write it up, all in the matter of 15 minutes. I cover pretty much breaking news for Politico, and my deadline is always pretty much like 5 minutes ago. So I have to, that's something that I've had to learn really, really quickly how to do. So that's, and I don't, again, it's hard to do in a classroom setting, but I think more of what you can do to sort of try to, if you have a 2-hour class, like make them go out and just find a story within that 2-hour time frame. And even if it seems impossible, that's a lot of times what you're going to have to do in this business. So, and to try to get that as soon as possible, going as soon as possible.
In 2005, I had my first job as an education reporter at a small newspaper. We had 3 reporters and 1 staff photographer and 1 editor. At that same time, a good friend of mine was at Berkeley's J School and doing the boot camp, and I think back on this story often because she said, I'm really busy. I have to do a story every day. And I said, that's a vacation. That sounds pretty good to me. I'm doing 3 or 4 stories a day. I think even still, I file my court stories within 10 to 15 minutes of being outside of the courtroom. I learned that from getting out of a school board meeting at 10 o'clock and having to turn around copy by 10:30.
I feel like I have a sort of luxurious job compared to because I work for a magazine, so I don't work on a strict deadline. My projects tend to take a little bit more time and are a little more sort of involved in the conceptualization, and it's more long-term projects. So I think for me, it's actually the thing I wish I had learned in school is very different. I wish I was more fluent in coding, and that I had a better grasp of the development end of things, not so that I could do it myself necessarily, but just so when I have an idea, I can describe it to a developer without sounding like a complete idiot. So I don't have that deadline pressure, but there are still things I wish I had learned in school, and that's probably the top one.
I also think one more thing that tends to be missing a lot is a focus on really good editing skills and copy editing skills. I know I learned, you learn a lot of reporting, writing, multimedia skills, but there isn't as big of a focus on editing as I should be. And I mentioned this especially because so many entry-level jobs these days are web producing positions. I went to the Asian American Journalists Association convention a few months ago, just walking around the job fair. I mean, great places like the Washington Post, the New York Times, Politico, all these places had openings for web producers, and that's a great way to get into a great organization. I mean, that's how I got into Politico, but in just the way that most, I mean, I can only speak to how Politico works, but I mean, like, you're producing content for the web constantly, and a lot of times these producers who are recently out of school, their eyes are almost the last line of defense before the story gets published out. I mean, I don't know how many times I've caught errors, like, I think this guy is a Republican, not a Democrat, or like, I think you meant trillions of dollars, not billions of dollars, stuff like that. So I think having those editing skills really helped me to sort of say, like, I can do more than just, produce content for the website. And I think that's a skill that isn't being emphasized as much, especially when that's one that's so necessary for jobs.
And I'll agree with that. Actually, I took a news writing and editing class here at Maryland that was very helpful, but I think more and more, there are fewer lines of defense before a story reaches readers. I mean, as a reporter, you may be posting directly to a blog. It's very much a luxury to have a copy editor look at a piece, and to have an editor and a copy editor look at a piece especially. So, you really want to be able to be multiple lines of defense and read through your copy with a critical eye, the same way that a copy editor would, because, ultimately it's going to be your byline and your reputation when there's a typo, when there's a factual error, et cetera.
I think it's something that I think that needs to be re-instilled over and over. And what just stuck out to me that you said was that there are fewer eyes, and you mentioned like the web producer, like I do, is the last line of defense against, they have that power. We have that power to click, submit, and it's on the web and it goes everywhere. And Stephen brings up a good point. They say a diamond is forever. Well, so is a tweet. When that thing goes out, it's out there forever. It's not coming back, and in my opinion, deleting tweets is one of the worst things you can do. It kind of reeks of a lack of accountability in the newsroom. But at the same time, you have to look at that very, very critically. And we have all these great new tools, and everybody's really excited to find ways to integrate Facebook and Twitter and all these awesome new things. But, basic reporting and editing, catching your own errors, remembering to take that extra couple of seconds to look back and make sure everything is spelled right, the syntax is correct, you're not missing any words. Those are mistakes that I've made, and don't think that people don't notice. They will tweet back at you and say, hey, guess what, you spelled this wrong. Thanks for the breaking news, but you spelled the wrong. It happens, and it's something that as we move on and as technology and everything progresses, something that we need to continue to reinstill into journalism students is you still have to do journalism correctly before you can do anything else. These are just great ways to distribute what we do. You still have to learn how to be a journalist.
Can I add something real quick? For entrepreneurship, of course, anything having to do with money, business plans, legal, how to file your taxes, just real basic stuff like that.
So I want to get back to, and Jody, I'll get your question next. I wanted to get back to what you were saying about the pace and how journalism schools don't really reflect newsroom environments and the pace of how you do that. And I think I'd probably get more than a few amens in here when I say this. As an instructor and when we're designing the curriculum, it's very hard to get in all of those things in the traditional 3-credit model for undergraduate education. As students and as recent graduates, would you be willing to swallow a different model for that? I mean, we always hear this is a lot of work for a 3-credit class, this is a lot of work for a 3-credit class, but how do we get all these other skills in there without sacrificing the basics like basic reporting and editing skills and stuff like that? That's speechless. Okay, so you basically have the same reaction that many faculty do.
That's why I'm glad that you guys make the curriculum and not me.
One thing I will say, and I went to the University of Maryland, as I mentioned, so that's sort of my entire perspective here. But one thing that I think Maryland does really well and has continued to do more so since I've left is looking at ways to do kind of capstones or looking differently at sort of the traditional 3-credit model. For example, I did not participate in this, but I know all graduate students do. It's called Capital News Service, which are news bureaus that the university runs. There's one in Annapolis and one in DC. And students get credit for that. Undergraduates can be selected for it as well and get credit for it toward their degree. But it does really put them in a real newsroom environment. They are expected to have breaking news and to publish stories regularly and to work a beat, all skills that are very hard to replicate in a traditional classroom setting, and yet they're getting credit for that. And I do think journalism schools should look more at offering courses like that, and in that situation, the professor acts as a bureau chief and an editor. And really, I think that's a tremendous experience that probably a lot of schools could learn from, because that's what the real newsroom is.
I like that idea, and as a CNS veteran myself, and my bureau chief, Chris Harvey, is here. Hi, Chris. Yeah, I love that. I did that twice as well. I did it at Arizona State for my undergrad at Cronkite Newswatch, and I did it here at CNS. I like the hybrid model that you brought up, in which perhaps in a class, even in a basic newsroom news writing class, you give them that example of, even if it's just a contrived press conference where you come in and you're not necessarily learning out of the book and you're not giving a lecture, but perhaps even the instructor gives a hybrid news conference and says you have the next 90 minutes to write this story and file it. Or I actually really like that idea. Go out and find something that's going on campus, write about it, report on it, bring it back, write it by the end of class. It's not perfect, and it's going to be very rough, especially for younger students, but I'm a big advocate of learning by doing. I think that journalism is great. There have been a lot of great journalism books. There are lots of great journalism instructors, but this is a business where you learn by getting your hands dirty. And if we are sending our students out to get their hands dirty and get it done early, let them kind of experience that trial by fire as much as possible. First of all, they're going to figure out if they can do it really, really early on, whether they can hack it. And number two, if they can, man, you give an 18-year-old that kind of confidence as a freshman that they can go out and write a story in 2 hours, forget it. You got a journalist for life.
I think what's interesting is that there is actually an environment on campus where students can learn these deadline skills, and that's the student media. But the problem is that so few schools incentivize participation in student media. So for instance, Syracuse has a daily paper where, they're putting out a paper every day. Kids are reporting on deadline. But the editors there make like 65 cents an hour and fail out of all their classes. So I think if a model could be set up where students got some kind of academic credit for participating in the paper, then they would learn those skills. It kind of takes the burden off of the professors to actually have to teach that, but you still have kids learning that in a really productive and enjoyable environment.
I think in addition to that, I'm not quite familiar with most journalism schools do, but I know at least for my undergrad, an internship wasn't required for graduation, and at some places it is. And so when I graduated, I was actually kind of flabbergasted that a lot of these students went for 4 years in college and didn't have a real journalism experience. And even, if it's hard to get an internship, then have a semester at the college paper count as one. It's just, so if it's hard to, if it's difficult to integrate sort of that real world experience into a classroom, then at least have that sort of requirement. And I know there are a lot of logistics behind that make it difficult, but I think that it's just really crucial to have that be a requirement and not just an addition, sort of a benefit to your curriculum once you graduate. And just sort of, so just sort of in response to it's so difficult to put everything in a 3-credit course, it's too much work. But that's journalism. I'm kind of so when I hear that, I just kind of hear well, that's why a lot of, students these days aren't prepared, because it is a lot of work. I work 12, 13-hour days constantly where I'm just reading, learning, studying, calling countless people. It's just, that's the real world. It is work. So, that's, yeah.
Jody, you had a question.
I think you represent the best of what we can teach. So I think your classmates when you were in school, you saw among those you were taking classes with, those who are not employed, and probably never will be because they didn't bother to get an internship. My question to you is, did some of your professors, now that you've been in the profession for a while, grade you too softly?
That was one of my points actually when I was taking notes to prepare for this, and yes, definitely. I remember sometimes like the average grade in a course was like an A-, and I'm like really, like it's. I think that, I mean.
What can we do about it?
That, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a teaching expert, but I do definitely feel
What do you
that.
wish we would have done differently?
That teach-a-thon yesterday, one of the presenters had something that kind of blew my mind, was that rubric where they didn't get letter grades per se, they got they got judged by a panel of their fellow peers, and I think that first of all, that's way less discouraging. You get a paper back, you get an article back, and it's a D or it's a C. Well, what does that D or C mean? I think it's way more meaningful when you're getting honest, real feedback about the article, and you're not, I'll just take exactly what the presenter said yesterday, when you're not writing for a grade, you're writing to get better. And that's the way I always thought about it, where my professors aren't going to like this, but I took my grades seriously, but I didn't take them that seriously because I wasn't writing necessarily to get the A. I think that it's important to instill that you are writing and we are putting you through these to get better and make you a better writer. And if it is solely your goal in a journalism writing course to get an A or to get a B, to get that letter grade, well, the business school is around the corner. They'll give you letter grades if you want them. J School should be a place where we're encouraging them to progress and to get better rather than shoot for an A in every single article.
And I swear that the Maryland did not pay me to come talk up their program, but I will say one thing I liked about Maryland is I don't feel I've graded too lightly. In the reporting classes at Maryland, if you have a factual error in a story, even if it's a typo, you fail it. If you show up to class 1 minute late, 1 minute past deadline, you fail the assignment. And that snaps a lot of freshmen and a lot of sophomores' attention really quick. And you see a lot of kids drop out of the program, and it's part of weeding out, but it sets a precedent. And I never, in all 4 years at Maryland, I never failed an assignment for factual error or lateness because of that policy. And now that I'm a reporter, I don't, as often as I can, don't turn a story in past deadline and I haven't had a factual error, and it's because that's instilled early on. So I do think you have to be a little bit harsh, especially at the onset, because you establish that precedent and move forward from there.
For the record, I did, and it sucked. And I never wanted to do it again.
As someone who didn't go to Maryland, that sounds like an excellent policy. So, yeah.
I agree. I will say that I did go to UC Santa Cruz when we didn't have a required GPA requirement at that time, so my transcript is a stack of written evaluations like this. I wouldn't give that up for the world. I think that response from my instructors in many ways made me the reporter and writer I am today. And I say that even from my evaluations in anthropology classes, that sort of feedback on my ability to think critically, respond, and write was what made me learn how to improve both myself and my abilities.
I actually agree completely with Laura that obviously grade inflation is a problem, and I think not just in J School, probably in any program, grade inflation is rampant. But if you're still getting very thoughtful, critical feedback from your professors, I think that inflation is less of an issue. The best professor I think I ever had, everyone left her class with an A or A-, I'm virtually positive. But if you gave her a 1,200-word story, she would give you 1,200 words of feedback in like purple pen at the end of the story. So even if you left the class with an A and perhaps didn't deserve it, you also left a much stronger writer than you entered, and I think ultimately that's what matters.
We have another question up front.
You touched on this a little bit. As she said, you guys are, if you're here, you're picking a crop from the classes. But I wanted to know your observations of your classmates while you're in school. I'm in charge of our education on campus, and it surprises me as a senior, like you, that there are a lot of students that haven't had an internship and don't even know where to start. But we do have student media on campus, and it kind of also surprises me that a lot of students don't take advantage of those organizations on campus. And I was wondering if you saw that as well at your school.
Yeah, I think, and also, like, I do sympathize. Like, I know that they can't take the extra time because they're working like a second, or, you know, they're working a job to pay for school. So I understand that. So I just think that any sort of resources that J schools could provide to help them get internships, or like make it easier for them to work on the student campus or whatnot, can be really helpful. I mean, I think both at Iowa, where I went to undergrad, and yeah, I sort of see that both places.
This may come out harsher than I want it to, so I apologize in advance. But as professors, you can teach motivation and you can't teach diligence, and that's just the fact of the matter. And there are many students who are very hardworking, and perhaps they have to work to pay through school or what have you, but there are also a lot of students who just don't want to put in the time and put in the effort. They want to go to their classes, but enjoy their 4 years and spend their social time. And you know what? That's their prerogative. If they pay their tuition, that's their prerogative. But there are other students who are going to do, 3-4 internships before they graduate, and they're going to be the editor of the college paper, and they're going to do fellowships, and they that's their choice too. They sacrifice a lot to do it, and ideally in the end they reap the reward. So I think, from a student's perspective, you just have to decide if you're willing to commit, and how much. And the more you do commit, I've seen time and time again, the more you do commit, the better results you're going to see at the end. And I think as professors, I think you need to really spell that out for kids early on, that it's not, that it is going to require some sacrifice, that it is going to take hard work, and it does require motivation if you really want to start out of school, in jobs like all the panelists have. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's not a guarantee. But once you spell that out, it's up to the student to deliver.
Sir.
I suspect that your employers don't expect you to be fully formed journalists the day you show up. And I'm wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about the mentoring or professional development that you receive the day after you arrive.
Where I'm at, and at ABC7, it's a little tough because, from my perspective, I graduated from college, started working in a top 15 market in Phoenix, moved here, got my master's, started working in a top 10 market here in DC. But what strikes me, and especially on my perspective, working pretty much exclusively on the website, is that there is so much experimentation going on, and there is a recognition that there is so much progress that we are going to try, and we are going to have our failings. What's great about where I work personally, from my perspective, is that my editors see that. My editors know that, I'm 26 years old. I've been in this specific job for a little over 10 months now. Mistakes are going to be made, and they don't expect you to make them after, the first time that you make it. But personally, at my desk, I sit next to my editor, and then my other editor is 2 seats away. And we have this great system and this great encouragement where I've got an editor that will always take the time to read my work with me. Before I want to publish it, if I have any qualms about it, I can, ring him on the phone or ping him and just say, can you take a look at this? Let's go over this a little bit more. Let's see how to make this better. I'm not saying that every editor in America is like that. I'm very fortunate to have an editor that does just that. If there were more like that recognizes, and forget just being young, it could be in your 5th job. And if you still don't want to continue to develop and get better, then you shouldn't be in this business anymore, because you should continually strive to adapt and learn and get better at your craft. And if every editor in America did that, then this business would be so much better off. My personal, experience, when you have that hands-on time with your editor that takes a vested interest in making you a better journalist, it's great. And you know what? They should, because at the end of the day, if they're helping us get better, then the product is better. And if the product is better, then what does that mean? More page views, more viewers, more advertisers, and isn't that what matters at the end of the day? So you should just keep getting better.
I would agree with that and say find an editor in the newsroom that will take you under their wing. there's ways to make editors into those sorts of people too. One of my secret tricks was always to keep a bowl of candy on my desk. The editors would walk past my desk, stop for the candy, and then we'd have a chance to talk about the story.
Ours is on the assignment desk.
Yeah. Well, if it's on the
smart.
reporter's
I'm gonna
desk,
start doing
on the stories that you need some extra help, change the candy to chocolate, and that will work.
Yeah. It'll be gone by the end of the day.
And you'll have the help you need on your story.
I totally agree with that. I think I've been very lucky to have great editors through all of my internships who were constantly helping me grow and offer feedback. And now that I'm in my job at the Post, the editor I work with directly is absolutely phenomenal at that. And I think you also have to encourage students to seek it out. And I think that does start actually when you're in school. If you're a professor that is open to having students meet with you and giving them feedback and actually taking that extra effort to show time and care. I mean, I can't even count on one hand how many professors I have that are still friends and mentors who, when I got my job offer at the Post and I had already committed to an internship, there were 5 people who I knew immediately. I want to consult them when I'm making this decision. And 3 of those 5 were professors who I had built a rapport with, who I built a trust with. And I think probably subconsciously that does carry over into your professional life. If you can feel comfortable reaching out to folks who are superior to you and asking feedback and not seeing that necessarily as a sign of weakness, that's really important.
So,
Are there any institutional mechanisms in place at the Post, POLITICO, at your station, elsewhere, that help shape and form you to be better journalists?
Well, the Post, for example, has fairly regular brown bag lunches where they'll bring in speakers, or not even necessarily bring in speakers, but bring in folks from the newsroom. Dana Priest, who's a top reporter at the Post, did a session on beat reporting that I went to. I found that phenomenal. I mean, and that's a resource that you have in-house. And not everyone can stop by her desk and ask her, about developing her beat because she's busy. But if you can get her in the room one day and you invite all the journalists to come, everybody learns from her skill set. And I think that, that's phenomenal. So bring folks in from outside or tap the resources that you have, but just amplify it. And you reach more people.
So we have a question about independent versus lab class student media. So Jack, do you want to take it away?
Caitlin brought up the idea of what Syracuse does with the Daily Orange, which is a totally independent corporation and all. And so, students are going to learn best in an independent environment. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on, that level of independence, totally independent student media versus what some of you have been describing sounds more like lab media, a news service where the instructor is like the bureau chief, or we're talking about incentivizing participation. Well, to me, that sounds like class pressure. Do you have any thoughts on?
I think
on the pros and cons of each side of that?
Well, I think student media serves a very important purpose, that independent student media, because nobody is, at least at the 2 places that I went to school, nobody was forcing students to go work for the Diamondback or at ASU at the State Press. When I was at ASU, I spent 4 years at the Blaze 1260 AM, which was our campus-run radio station. And I think what the importance of that is we can force these students to take these capstone labs, as you put it, and make it a requirement to do that semester of newsroom experience. What we have to instill in students, I believe, is that getting repetitions and doing something over and over again will only make you better at it. And independent student media is a place where they can do that, especially in college, where the spotlight isn't as big, the audience isn't as big, and the editors are going to be a lot more forgiving if you make a mistake in college and independent student media than anywhere else. Because in those places, we're talking about grades, nobody's really grading you there. That's your place to feel your way around, and it's a place to experiment. It's a place to... I keep coming back to this word. It's a place to have fun. It's a place to really enjoy what you're doing while learning at the same time. I was at that, like I said, I was at that station for 4 years. That was the most fun I ever had as a journalist. But at the same time, I learned so much from that experience. And it's something, if we can let our students know that we have this opportunity and you should take this opportunity to go and do it, multiple times outside of the classroom where maybe there isn't that pressure of a professor breathing down your back. You have a little time to work your way through the forest and, you know, practice your craft over and over and over again. And they might not feel it, and it might take, you know, a Saturday night away from them. But I think from our perspective up here, from everything I'm hearing, is those, and Jody brought it up, those experiences led us to, you know, have a job. The sacrifices early and the repetitions early led us to where we are now.
And I'll just add very quickly that because I was the editor of the Diamondback, and so I literally devoted my life to it when I was at Maryland, I think it's there. I can't stress enough the importance of independent student media, because I think at the Diamondback is a very proud tradition of that, and I think that instills in you as a journalist a sense of independence and a sense of what your role is as sort of an observer and an outsider and a watchdog. And I didn't necessarily participate in lab media, so I don't know if you would get that same sense from that. And I think it's important to have that ingrained in a journalist from early on. And I would also say, you know, you'll get experiences at good student media, and I emphasize the word good. You'll get experiences that will put you ahead of your peers and put you ahead when you get to internships. I mean, before, just speaking from personal experience, before I even got to the basic news writing course at Maryland, I had already been on the staff of the Diamondback for a summer and a semester. I had already covered the election of Martin O'Malley and gone to campaign events and interviewed campus officials. And by the time I got to Journalism 320, which is advanced reporting where you get a beat, I had already covered the State General Assembly for a semester. You know, it was so, I mean, those are experiences that I wouldn't have gotten without the Diamondback. I would not have gotten my first internship after freshman year without the Diamondback. So I do think, you know, the comment was made of incentivizing student media. I think that's absolutely great. I don't know that college credit is necessarily the way to do it, because I think independence plays an important role.
And what is?
Well, the Diamondback was paid, so that you know, money's a great motivational tool. If you didn't, but I think emphasizing the importance. I definitely had professors in school who undervalued my time at the Diamondback, who undervalued the importance of student media. And when I didn't have an assignment because I had been out all night covering an event for the campus media, said, you know, why are you know, you're throwing your journalism education away, or how is that more important than my class? And I understand. Well, I can't even lie and say I totally understand where they're coming from, because I don't. Because I, like you, that's an experience that I couldn't have gotten in that class. And it was not at all disrespect to the professor. I was just trying to learn to be a journalist. And class is one way to do that, and it's an important way to do that, but it's not the only way.
I think I just want to add to that. I mean, again, just emphasizing the importance, I probably would not be where I am today without working at my college newspaper at the Daily Iowan, which is, it's usually considered one of the best college papers in the country. We're completely independent of the J school there. And yeah, by the time I had taken a lot of the journalism courses, I think by the time I was 18, I had covered murder trials, cop shootings, and the 2004 Iowa caucuses. I mean, that's an experience that, I mean, a lot of people, maybe even, you know, 5-7 years older than me, would not have, having been in a daily journalism career. So just, yeah, that's.
So you're the one talking about incentivizing, though. What are your ideas for doing that? To make, you guys are all self-motivating. I mean, but how can we, as professors?
I think that all of our jobs are about self-motivating, and if you can't self-motivate at a college paper, you need to seriously rethink what your motivations are.
I mean, tell them, like, you will not get a job if you don't have clips, if you don't and the college paper is by far one of the best ways, or probably the best way to get a clip, great clips. I mean, I had a great first internship, and it's just because I had worked on the college paper when I was 17 and 18, like when I was the youngest person on staff, and then that get me to another great internship, and so on and so forth, and eventually to Politico, where I am today. So I mean, that's,
well, think about what we've just been talking about here, in which these student media outlets can sell experiences that you can get as a 17 and 18-year-old or a 19-year-old while you're still in college. You cover the Iowa caucuses. You were at Martin O'Malley's events. When I was at ASU, you know, for 3 years, I was covering Pac-10 football in the press box. And at 19, I was covering Pac-10 football. I think that's the kind of thing, if you let these students know that if you participate in these, those should be the incentives yourself. You're getting this really unique access that not everybody on your campus is going to get. You volunteer and you devote your time, you're going to get to go to campaign events. You're going to go interview the next governor of Maryland. You're going to get to be in the locker room after these games. And if that doesn't get the juices of a young journalist flowing to get that kind of access so early in their careers, then, I keep saying, maybe they should find another career, because that's the incentive.
Well, I want to add to that as a semi-counterpoint that I think a daily, especially a daily college newspaper, can be a very intimidating place, particularly if you're coming in as a freshman or sophomore. A lot of people don't recognize yet that they are strong enough to do it. And I think as professors, you can really encourage students. If you see a student who's great, who does well on their assignments, but is not involved with the student media, say, look, you're a smart writer. You have the potential to be a good journalist. You really should go after this. It's going to be hard at first, but I recognize in you, the ability to handle it. So go at it hard for a semester and see how you feel coming out of it. I think that encouragement can go miles.
Lots of questions. Why don't we go in the back of the room, in the corner, in the brown shirt, sorry, glasses?
We've talked a lot about the quality of editing that you're getting on your jobs. Could you talk a little about the quality of the editing at the campus independent newspaper that you're describing?
Oh, man.
I was an editor, so I thought it was great.
I mean, it comes and goes, and year to year sometimes. You can have great editors, you can have horrible editors, and quite frankly, you learn a lot from both. And so sometimes it's not great, but I think you're getting your feet wet and you're learning. And as was said before by Justin, there's room for mistakes, but not all mistakes. I definitely fired people when I was the editor of the Diamondback who either committed journalistic sins like fabrication or plagiarism, or just weren't good. They got demoted, or because we had a budget and we had advertisers and we had readers and we had a professional paper to put out. And so it's not always going to be good, but I think the experience, there's something to be learned regardless.
I think that's actually a really good and very important point. When I was at student media, I was often very frustrated by having to work with, people who I didn't think were great editors or things like that. When you're in the real world, you realize that is the real world. You have to work with people who you disagree with. You have to work with people who, destroyed your perfectly crafted prose. So I think that is another benefit of student media, is actually having poor editors and realizing that, you have to deal with situations you don't agree with, and being a journalist that's part of that.
So I just want to we have one question coming in from Adam Dean. We hear a lot of reference to the editing process, and he assumes text. When you're saying the editing process, you're also including multimedia, video. Is it treated differently, or should we all learn the same skills?
Well, obviously, I think that we should, journalism students should be learning everything at this point. I think that they're doing themselves a disservice if they're not going out there and learning and getting edited on every single platform.
I'm going to disagree with you on that, actually, to a certain point. I think it's important that students know the realm of what's out there and that they have experience in multiple skill sets. But I still think having one or two really core competencies is important. Because I think even as our medium changes, even if a print story is being read in a newspaper, online, on an iPad, on a phone, it's still written words. Or no matter how a video is viewed, it's still a video and the quality doesn't change. And so I wouldn't have the job I have now, which is primarily a writing position, if I was not a really strong writer and had a background and experience in writing that could prove that I could deliver. If I was a jack of all trades who was okay at everything but great at nothing, I don't think I'd be in this position. But I think if you're great at one or two things and then you're good or decent or have experience at two or three more, it works to your advantage. But I don't know that I necessarily agree with the idea that students should learn everything, and I think they should have concentrations and be exposed to other things.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions, so I'm going to go here, then we'll come up.
I'm sorry, I
Yep.
just wanted to follow up, that was my question. But I really mean the editing process. So why don't videos get treated like a story and get edited like text? I mean hard news.
Oh, coming from a large newsroom, I may actually not be the best to answer that, because even in situations where I would produce a video, which most of them are shorter videos that don't necessarily require a lot of editing or aren't complex packages, because I am a primarily print reporter, there are still folks in the newsroom, and this maybe reflects on my previous point, who have a core competency in video editing. We have videographers and video editors, and I imagine their process is very hands-on and very collaborative, just the way my print writing is with my print editor. But I guess they're within a larger newsroom, because we do have those separate sections and people with their separate skill sets, I maybe don't see as much overlap.
Okay, yes.
Kind of segue into that pretty much. I think at least 2 or 3 of you said that you got a job at publication as an entry-level web producer. I'm really curious to know what you do as an entry-level web producer, what preparation, what skills helped you as an undergrad or graduate student to get you ready for that, and what are the expectations, the sort of skill set. If we're talking about core competencies, that someone who is a entry-level web producer would need or do.
Well, in my job, at least, what I can do is take you through a little bit of what I have to do every day. And you made a very good counterpoint. I think there's a lot true of what you said. You know, every single day I'm working with every single form of media there is. If I'm not writing a story, I'm editing a photo. If I'm not editing a photo, I'm cutting video. If I'm not cutting video, I'm monitoring our social networks. And if I'm not doing that, I'm monitoring metrics. There's so much that goes into the entry-level position. And so while I do think it is important, you make an excellent point at being very, very strong at 1 or 2 things, there is an expectation at the specific job that I have, in which you do have to be able to get your hands dirty in every aspect of the production of the website. And it's not just the production of the website. You have to be in a TV newsroom. You have to be in touch with the photographers. You have to know how to communicate with a photographer. You have to be able to communicate with a reporter, with the editors, with the assignment editors. There's so much that goes into it, and there's such an expectation that you at least know a little bit about everything. And that's, I think, where I was coming from, is that if you go into a newsroom and you want to be an entry-level web producer, and you don't know how to edit a photo, and somebody calls on you and says, we have this group of photos, we need to make it into a photo gallery, and we need it now, if you're falling behind, you're doing a disservice to your organization, and perhaps your competitor gets it first. So there is a lot that goes into it, and that's, I think, what I mean when I say, you can be a really, really strong writer, you can be a really, really good videographer. You have to have a level of competency at almost everything across the spectrum to get a job like that. And it's stressful, and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of devotion and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point. Web editor, it's on the content side. We have a team of developers that does all of the on the back end. But I think that having at least a basic knowledge in those skills is very important, because I use HTML every day. Do I code the entire site? No. But I know enough that if something has to be done, that I can do very quickly, whether it's embedding a map or embedding a photo or something like that, I can do that. So in my specific job description, there was, not expert knowledge of HTML, but we were expected to know some. And we were expected to know if I have additional photos that I needed to put into a story, that I could do it. Do I think that every journalist needs to know how to code a website and design a Flash narrative? No, I don't think that every single person needs to know that, getting back to the point of being a master at something, because hopefully in your newsroom, somebody else will have that. If it's a good forward-looking publication, they will hire somebody that makes up for the deficiency maybe that you have, but you continue to learn that. And my specific job description had to write strongly, had to know how to edit photos, had to know how to edit video, had to know search engine optimization, It's all stuff that I'm not perfect at. I don't think anybody is perfect at, but you at least have to know, and what more you have to be able to go back in there and learn it as you go along. And you get better at it, like I said, the more times that you do it. Yes.
And just being comfortable with different content management systems is important too for those web producing positions. I mean, you don't have to learn like a specific program because every publication has a different system. But as long as you've worked in different types of CMSs and just be able to get up to speed quickly if you have that background. I had to do a little Photoshop for my thing. Nothing too advanced, but just being comfortable in that helped. Being able to write really good headlines helps. Yeah. SEO friendly, but also, I mean, like, Politico has great headlines, like funny things that you would want to click on, interesting, just different, making people want to read. I mean, it's not just search engine optimization all the time. You ultimately want to make people click on your story.
Very key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's do one more question. I know the gentleman in the jacket and glasses had his hand up.
Perfect way to cap, I guess. I want to distinguish this from the question that Matt asked you at the beginning, where what skills did you most find out? I want to know when you left the classroom, entered the real world, got your first job, what surprised you about your job? Whether it's about the people, whether it's about the environment, whether it's about the typical day, whether it was about the standards applied. And this could be good or bad, but what surprised you guys the most? What did you just say, wow, I didn't expect that?
I can start with that one. As I said, my job is very traditional. In 2004, I was surprised, one, by the pace of the newsroom, of the small newsroom I was working in. I was hired based on my clips from the college paper. My first day on the job, the editor threw a digital camera at me and said, "Take this along with you, you're the photographer today." I think today that's more expected. In 2004, it certainly wasn't. In addition to that, sort of the counterpoint was how much we could do with how little. With 3 reporters and a photographer and an editor, we covered the hell out of that county. And I beat everyone on every school board story that I did in the region. I think that surprised me that we could do that.
I've only been at my job for 6 weeks, so I'm surprised by a new thing literally every day. But I think 2 things stand out really clearly to me, and this is obviously going to be different than maybe at a daily paper, an organization like that. I'm at a monthly magazine. Number one, I was really surprised that politics are a thing within a newsroom. So just coming from a classroom, you think in the real world everything is magically resolved, everyone gets along, there's no infighting. So that, obviously that is totally idyllic and completely wrong. So that was a surprise to me. And the other thing was the degree to which the media does not have it figured out. That was another expectation I had. I'm learning things in school, and then when I get, to this place, they're just going to have their entire web strategy perfectly articulated. They're going to know exactly how to get people to click things and advertisers, and, the revenue model is all figured out and whatever. But actually, when I came in, it was amazing to me how often people were turning to me for ideas. And I'm, 22 and just got out of school, but people are, asking me, Caitlin, what can we do with data visualization to get some type of new thing that people are going to click through a lot, or what can we do with Tumblr? So the degree to which young people are actually leaned on for ideas was really surprising in the best possible way. It was so exciting to me.
Can I add to newsroom politics working within the guild? That was an education in and of itself.
Okay. So we've got time for, I'd kind of like to close this panel with this question that I'll pose you, and I didn't send it to you in advance, so we'll see how well you think on your feet. If you were named dean of a journalism school, in a tweet, what would you say? And coincidentally, there are 5 major deanships open, so if you're looking for a job, I'm sure we'd love to have you. In a tweet, what would you say? What would you do? Or your advice? What would be your mission? You want to start at the end, or Justin, do you want to go first?
No, let's start at the end.
What would my mission be?
Yeah. What would be your first thing that you'd tell your faculty?
My mission would be to get students to be excited about the internet. That would really be the #1 thing. I know it's different at every school. I was in a print major, and I was astounded that like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids were not excited about the possibilities of journalism on the internet. That's a cultural thing. Those people should be more excited than anyone, and in so many cases, kids in my classes complained about having to tweet. Really? Like, to tweet? You should be so excited about that. So if I was dean of a journalism school, I'm not sure how I would do it, but I would want to change that heavily like print-based culture.
I think I would probably insist that every student had a blog covering a beat for at least one semester. If you can't find a beat that you're excited enough to write a blog entry about every day, find one.
I don't know. This is why I'm not going to be a dean of I don't know. It's just get ready to work hard and have fun. I love my job, so it's hard to sort of articulate, like how do you sort of convey that love to other people who may not. I mean, I don't know. That's a bad answer, but I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, this is really, really hard. I think the first thing I would do is stress the fact that what we do is still incredibly important, and that hasn't changed, and that people rely more today on what we do and the content we produce than we used to, even if circulation numbers are down. But I think then I would stress that, the importance of adaptability, that, the economy is going to look different 4 years from now. The way people consume news may be different 4 years from now. We can't control that, but what we can control is how good we are at gathering information and disseminating that information. Because that's true no matter what medium it's in.
Before I say my piece, I'd like you to think about what I'm about to say broader than the literal meaning. If I were the dean, I would tell my faculty members that I want all of their students to fail. Because I think that if our students are not failing, they are not trying hard enough. I have so much admiration at that pitch session yesterday for those folks that got up and made their pitch, because the likelihood of them succeeding at that pitch is rather low. And I think that in this media culture, if our students are not trying new things and trying new adventurous ways to tell stories, and they're not crashing and burning and coming back to our faculty to do it all again, then we're not doing our jobs, because this is something that we are trying to motivate them to get better. And in my mind, you're not getting better if you're not failing every once in a while, because you learn from your failures, you learn from your mistakes, and you get better from your mistakes. So in that short sentence, I would tell my faculty that I want their students to crash and burn, and I want you to coach them up to make them even better after they do.
So I'd like to thank the panel for coming out today.